What is the most important gift the church has ever given you in your life? Last Sunday, we remembered the words of the Apostle Paul. We have this treasure in clay jars so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. These words are written to the church, not just individuals. So the church is a community that holds the treasure of the gospel in jars of clay. Now, there was a time when the church held significant sway over culture. There was some good to that, and there were some problems with that. But for the more common today, the church is viewed with suspicion, even hostility at times. Sadly, the church has given plenty of reasons to be viewed this way, historically and recently. Just in the last couple of years, there's all the sexual misconduct scandals of the Catholic Church, especially here in Pennsylvania when that report came out a couple of years ago. There was a similar report from the Southern Baptist Church that came out earlier this year. Just in the past year, several of the pastors of the largest congregations in the world have had to step down because of impropriety, misconduct. Paul was wise. He knew long ago that as long as faith in Jesus Christ is tied to the church, we have this treasure in clay jars. The blundering of the church has at times been foolish, other times shameful. It's hard to say when the most shameful moment of the church took place. The fact that there are so many options is sad, but honest. We read this morning a portion of a conversation between Jesus and Pilate. And as John records it, Jesus said, if his kingdom was of this world, his followers would be fighting to keep Jesus from being handed over to the Jews. I cringe a little bit when John talks like that. In chapter 9, when Jesus heals the man born blind, John says the Jews did not believe he had been born blind. In chapter 10, it says the Jews took up stones to stone Jesus. And in this passage, it makes it sound like Jesus has enmity with the Jews. We know the dangerous consequences of this kind of thinking. It wasn't long after Christians experienced being the religion of empire from Constantine that Christians began to hold hostility to Jews, deeming them killers of Christ. The full ugliness of this conviction manifested itself in the Holocaust. In Susan Neiman's book, Evil in Modern Thought, she says, what's most appalling is that the most unprecedented crimes can be committed by the most ordinary people. The Holocaust happened in the center of Western civilization by people who read Shakespeare, listened to Bach in the evenings, and ran the ovens during the day. And on the weekends, they were in church. In 1948, after the full horror of the Holocaust was known, the evangelical church in Germany said that the Holocaust happened because God was punishing Jews for their rejection and continued crucifixion of Christ. That's the church. How does the church do that? Let it happen. Not stop it, not speak against it. How do we get there? Well, that's a big historical question. One I hope to explore a little more when I go to Berlin in April. But one pastor at the time gives us some insight. His name is Martin Niemöller. Niemöller later wrote that he originally voted for Hitler because of the Nazi pledge to honor Christianity and to provide Germany with a strong leader who would restore German pride. He later found out that his phones were tapped and was thrown into a concentration camp for speaking out that the Nazis were anti-Christian. I'll be visiting that camp in a little over a month. His Jewish cellmate would report that Niemöller said that he had an audience with Hitler as a representative of the Protestant church shortly before Hitler became chancellor in 1932. Hitler promised me, says Niemöller, on his word of honor to protect the church and not to issue any anti-church laws. So for Niemöller, this is a no-brainer. Here's somebody who says he's going to defend Christianity. Make Christianity great again, not have it go down. And Niemöller also said that Hitler agreed to not allow any pogroms against the Jews. Niemöller said Hitler's assurance satisfied him at the time. But he said, on the other hand, I hated the growing atheistic movement, which was fostered and promoted by the Social Democrats and the Communists in Germany. Their hostility toward the church, says Niemöller, made me pin my hopes on Hitler for a while. I'm paying for that mistake now, and not me alone, but thousands of other persons like me. Some Christians actively participated in the Holocaust. Others helped create the environment for that kind of atrocity to flourish. And others were just thankful they weren't the targets, so they said nothing and kept going to church to thank God it was the Jews and not them. I'm disheartened to see so much more anti-Semitism spreading once again. My good friend Rabbi Daniel gets threats against himself and his family, especially his kids, nearly weekly. He's shown me some of the hate, some of the images he's been sent, and it's sickening and it's terrifying. Images photoshopped of his kids by ovens. This is 2023. It's not gone. So why has this happened? Why does this happen? It's nationalism, it's xenophobia, it's jealousy, it's misunderstanding, it's power, it's scapegoating. When things are wrong, we want to find someone to blame. And so we find someone, a group, a person, make them an identified patient. They're the scapegoat, and we can feel better. It's all of that. But much of it can be traced back to the Gospel of John. So why did John talk that way about the Jews? Was John anti-Semitic? No. John's Gospel is written in the midst of a family fight. At the time of his writing, John's mostly Jewish community was engaged in a theological fight over the significance of Jesus. When the temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE, all of Judaism began rethinking, what does it mean to be Jewish? The followers of Jesus had understood themselves to be a part of Judaism. But after the destruction of the temple, tensions began to grow. The followers of Jesus were either kicked out or walked out of formal Judaism. It's the original church split. It was in that context that John's gospel is written. Now, I know some of you have been in congregations when there was a division in the church. It can get painful and nasty. Words can become extreme. When I was serving the Presbyterian church in Delavan, Illinois, there's a small town. The Baptist church in town was going through a split, and things got ugly. One church became two, family split, friendship split. It wasn't just a matter of worship preference or theology. To hear it from them, it was a battle between good and evil. I experienced the same thing during an argument at a Presbyterian church I was consulting with in Illinois. Things got personal and painful. Half the church left. It still hasn't recovered. The division in John's congregation was particularly painful, and that pain shows up in his writing. It's important to understand that. A text without a context is just a pretext. And many scholars believe that when John says the Jews, he's only talking about a particular group in leadership, those in power, the priests and the Sanhedrin, not an entire race of people. John was not anti-Semitic, but wrote in a Jewish worldview. And John offers no justification for anti-Semitism. Now, anti-Semitism in the church may be our most shameful moment, but it's not our only one. We have so many. As you well know, I'm a product of the Southern Presbyterian Church. We were all one church until the Civil War, and the church split north and south. It was in December of 1861 when leaders of the church gathered in Augusta, Georgia. Maybe they wanted to play golf, and that's why they gathered there, I don't know. But they went to Augusta at a church where Woodrow Wilson's father served as the pastor. And the church offered a formal statement, which among other things said this, and I quote, "As we contemplate the condition of the slave in the southern states and contrast it with that of their fathers before them and that of their brethren in the present day in their native land, we cannot but accept it as a gracious providence that they have been brought in such numbers to our shores and redeemed from bondage of barbarism and sin." Our church was declaring the institution of slavery to be the will of God and a gracious providence, a good and holy thing. It's shameful, but Christians defended the institution for hundreds of years with the simple phrase, "For the Bible tells me so." I was given a little cartoon a few years ago by one of you as a little funny joke. It simply reads, "Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite." I wonder if that's what women felt the church was saying to them through the generations. When we wanted them to teach the children and prepare the food for the covered dish supper, but they couldn't preach or serve on session or usher or count the money. About the same time the world figured out how to get a satellite into space, Presbyterians figured out how to let a woman in the pulpit. That's embarrassing. It's shameful. Paul knew that as long as faith in Jesus Christ is connected to the church, to Christians, the treasure of the gospel will be in clay jars. Now, why bring all this up? Because it seems like a bit of a downer sermon on a very nice Sunday morning. I have 3 reasons. First, when the church blesses bigotry, it's not only evil, it's foolish. It's evil because it injures those we dehumanize, whether due to race, religion, gender, politics, nationality, whatever. And it's foolish because they and others who are not even part of those groups look at us and say, "Why would you want to be a part of the church?" It matters. Study after study have shown that is the main reason why younger generations are not connecting with churches. They see the church as a place of exclusivity, a place of judgment, a place of hate. And even if it's not this particular church, we're under the umbrella. And so when one church does it, we don't speak out in super specific terms, people lump us all in together. They're hateful. They're exclusive. They're bigoted. Over and over again, that's what the studies show. What might be labeled as a conservative church, as a progressive, traditional, contemporary, all of them, all of us have been careless with language and quick to judge and condemn difference and lift up their side, our side, as right and righteous. You see, we simply cannot offer a faithful witness to Jesus Christ through hatred and condemnation. It simply doesn't work. It's a poor witness to Jesus Christ. And I think we see it as church membership at every single denomination and kind have been going down and down. But there's a second reason we need this reminder. We may see things differently than some who have gone before us, but we are not fundamentally different from them. We are still clay jars. The church will stumble. We will also hurt each other. It happens. We profess and trust a gospel that is always better than we are. We will fall short and disappoint people. This church, if it hasn't already, will at some point, probably many points, disappoint you. I have probably disappointed all of you in some way multiple times. The church will do it. If you are looking for a perfect church, this ain't the place. Good luck finding one. There isn't one. The gift is always better than the vessel. And if you're holding up the vessel as the most important thing, your expectations are never going to be met. And you're never going to find what you're looking for. But if you're looking for the gift, the treasure that's inside, you can find it many places, and it'll never leave you. So we must live our faith with a spirit of humility. When those outside of us offer critique, we should listen. We should pay attention. Our witness to Jesus Christ will never be perfect because we are clay jars, as Paul says. But a spirit of humility will keep us grounded and mindful of others. That's a Christian posture to take. But lastly, it's important to remember the complexity of the church's story because it's a testimony to God's faithfulness. If God had any inkling to give up on us, that would have happened by now because we've given God plenty of opportunity and reason. But what we know is that in spite of our history, the Spirit of God still shows up among us. So we keep gathering together week after week, not because this church is perfect, but because in spite of our clay realities, God has placed treasure among us. And I see it all the time. See, the church has saved my life. The church has taught and shown me how to lead a better and more abundant life with each other and with God. The church has called me to live toward a promised day. The church has shown me the honest truth of how the world is and the hope of how God's redemptive love could make it. So with humility and sometimes repentance, I am bold to speak my love of the church because in spite of her clay nature, God, for God's own grace's reasons, has filled the church with treasure. When I started this sermon, I asked you to think of something the church has given you. If you were able to do so, well, you know something of the treasure that I speak of. You've received a gift from this fragile, often broken, imperfect thing God has gathered together and called church. That's the hope I hold on to when I look at history, and sometimes our present, even the future of church. The gift is always better than the vessel, and yet the gift is still received some 2,000 years later, despite all the cracks and broken shards. The gift is still there. And the gift is here for you to take and to taste and to receive. This is God's table, and it's for you. There are no boundaries, no restrictions on who can participate in this meal. If you want the treasure God gives, then taste and eat and know that the Lord is good.